Do you know what it feels like to be told, you have 1 hour to pack your life and get your crying babies out, or the police will do it for you? 4 days after my husband died, that's exactly what I heard right there on the marble doorstep of his family's mansion. Here's the part that still makes my hands shake. The woman who said it now emails me for forgiveness and for money. My name is Amara, and I'm going to tell you how I went from a soaked, shivering widow with 2 6-month-old twins to the woman sitting at the head of the same dining table where they once told me to leave. It's a story about money and grief, but mostly, it's about how people behave when they think you're powerless. If it were you, what would you have done? Before any of this, I was a pediatric nurse. Double shifts, paper scrubs, a studio apartment that smelled like takeout, and the baby lotion we kept on the ward. I believed a simple set of things. Work hard, be kind, family is who shows up. Then a man in a navy suit walked onto my floor and spent 3 hours reading to kids and asking what our new library needed, not just cutting a check, actually asking. When he finally introduced himself, I almost dropped the med tray. "I'm David Whitmore," he said, like the name didn't loom over half the buildings in our city. Old money, old responsibility, quiet power. David never made me feel small. He made me feel seen. We got married in the family chapel with 500 of their closest friends, the kind where the string quartet's retainer could pay my rent for a year. His mother Patricia had that perfect silver hair and a smile that said, "Darling," and "know your place" in the same breath. His sister Caroline was razor-sharp pretty, the kind that photographs well and hugs light. "You're so authentic," she'd say when I wore something simple to a gala, laughing like it was a compliment. You know what I mean? Then came the twins, Marcus and Maya, early and loud and perfect. David was a 3 a.m. diaper dad, the off-key lullaby guy, the man who counted tiny fingers like they were rings he couldn't lose. We had 6 glowing months, then black ice, a collision, a phone call at 2:17 a.m., and a home suddenly filled with silence that swallowed you whole. The funeral was a pageant. Flowers the size of furniture, speeches from men who never changed a diaper. And in the corners, I saw the looks, the whispered, "We need to handle this," that didn't feel like grief, it felt like business. After the burial, we went back to the mansion. The house where David learned to take first steps, where he painted a nursery wall the softest green, where I'd started to believe I could belong. That's where it happened. "Amara, we need to discuss your living situation," Patricia said, voice smooth as the china. Caroline added, "This house belongs to the family. With David gone, there's no reason for you to stay." I remember the old clock ticking, the babies breathing in their car seats, the way my name sounded like an inconvenience. I said, "This is our home." Patricia tilted her head. "David's not here." Final like a gavel. They were very gracious, of course. They gave me until the end of the week. Do you think that's fair? The next morning, a man in a sleek suit materialized. Richard Blackstone, estate specialist, manicured kindness. He unrolled a language designed to make you nod. Trusts, beneficiaries, limited rights. And explained that most of the Whitmore wealth lived inside structures which sounded like a polite way to say, "not yours." He slid over quick claim forms and something labeled shared custody like it was a thoughtful gift. "If we work together, we can avoid unpleasantness," he said, smiling like a lifeguard while I drowned. Avoid what exactly? Little changes became the squeeze. The staff stopped meeting my eyes. The fridge reset like a hotel minibar. 1 lemon, 1 yogurt. Nothing that fed a mother and 2 infants. I pushed the twins' stroller 6 blocks to the grocery store for formula. And when I came back, Patricia was waiting with a child psychologist, Dr. Rebecca Harrison, who just wanted to observe the dynamics during this transition. Transition to what? She watched me change diapers and warm bottles and asked where my support system was when I planned to return to work, what daycare cost in my price range. Reasonable questions, sure. Until you realize they're assembling a report where your tears at your husband's funeral become evidence of instability. Yeah, that happened. That night, the housekeeper, Mrs. Chun, 30 years in that home, and the quietest step I've ever heard, knocked on my door and asked if she could speak with me. She called me Mrs. Whitmore like it mattered. He was worried she whispered, meaning David. He met with lawyers, not the family lawyers, before he died. He was making arrangements. Hope is strange after a week like that. It's not brightness, it's flint. I told myself, hold on until the will reading on Friday. The next days were a slow chess match I didn't know the rules to. Caroline came with designer baby clothes and sisterly advice that felt like a closing argument. Dr. Harrison shadowed me like a second shadow. I overheard Patricia on the phone with a judge, a name I wrote down and circled. And then Mrs. Chun told me about another woman years ago, Lisa, who fell in love with David's father, had a child, and somehow lost her baby to a temporary order that turned permanent. Rumors were spread, doctors testified, money moved like fog. I was young then, she said, eyes damp with 30-year guilt. I stayed quiet. I will not stay quiet now. A little after 2 a.m., I padded down to the basement office by the wine cellar. The security system blinked, asking for a password. I typed my baby's names and birthday, something only a father who adored them would choose, and the feeds opened. Hidden cameras in the dining room, the study, the places where power relaxes its shoulders. I watched Patricia and Caroline discuss emergency custody like it was a calendar item, watched Dr. Harrison accept a rush fee for a preliminary report, watched my grief turned into strategy. One line cut deeper than the rest. She's weaker than Lisa, Patricia said. This one will break faster. I copied everything. Audio-video logs, hands shaking but steady. Then the knock. Thursday morning, the day before the reading, a social worker and a police officer at my door, Dr. Harrison clutching her tablet. We've received a complaint, the social worker said. We have to place the children in temporary care. They had car seats ready, diaper bags packed. It was choreographed. Marcus reached for me, little mouth-forming mama, and Caroline said, "We're family. We'll make sure they're comfortable." I stood in the nursery after they left, and there's no pretty way to describe that sound your heart makes when it breaks and keeps beating. If it were you, what would you have done? Stick around because what happened next will blow your mind. Friday morning marble lobby elevator with mirrors that show you exactly how sleep-starved you look. The receptionist said Mr. Morrison would like to see you privately. Harold Morrison had represented the family forever. Steady voice files like fortresses. He closed the door, sat me down, and slid a thick folder across the table. "Amara," he said, "I'm not here for them today. I'm here for you." Inside was a number that didn't make sense at first. So many zeros your brain staggers. Over the last 3 years, he said slowly, David legally converted his beneficiary rights into personal assets, independent of the family trusts. Your husband's personal estate totals approximately $250 million. I didn't speak for a beat. He kept going. He also documented a pattern. Judges, consultants, old cases, including Lisa's O's. He left you evidence and a choice. 10 million and peace. Walk away, raise your children. Let the prosecutions proceed without you. Or the full inheritance and the mandate to dismantle the machine that hurt you. He placed a sealed letter on top. David's handwriting, the curve of an R I knew by touch. I thought about my baby's heads on my chest, about Lisa, about how many women never get this room, this file, this choice. War, I said. My voice didn't shake. The public reading felt like theater performed by people who didn't realize the script had been rewritten. Patricia at the head, Caroline to her right, James to her left, power arranged like silverware. Harold read the formal parts, then said to my beloved wife, Amara, and the room changed temperature. He laid out the assets, the controlling stakes David had purchased legally, the recordings he left in my care. James pushed back from the table so hard his chair scraped. "This is fraudulent," he snapped. Harold flipped to a tab and said very calmly, "No, it's documented." I didn't say much. I pressed play on my phone and 10 seconds of Patricia's voice filled the room. "She's weaker than Lisa." Caroline went white. I slid a photo across the table. Lisa in a courthouse corridor, date stamped, eyes swollen. "You did it to her," I said quietly. "You will not do it to me." Here were the terms, as plain as I could make them. Withdraw the CPS complaint within the hour, publicly correct. The record cooperate with the district attorney and step back from any position that could influence my children's lives. Or I walk out, and the evidence walks with me. The audio, the security footage, the financials, the names, the pattern in black and white. Do you think that's fair? The complaint was withdrawn at 2:15 p.m. At 4:03, someone placed my daughter back in my arms, and I could smell unfamiliar detergent in her hair, and didn't care. By midnight, an investigative reporter had what they needed to publish an exposé on the way power buys outcomes in family court. Around 11:47 p.m., my phone rang, and a careful voice said, "Mrs. Whitmore, this is Thomas, Lisa's son." I wanted to say thank you. Grief and justice live in the same breath sometimes. It feels like standing on a cliff and finally seeing the horizon. What follows in stories like this is usually a montage, but real life is messier. There were board meetings and titles quietly removed. There were press releases full of passive voice. "We are saddened we take this seriously." There were plea deals you will argue about in the comments. The district attorney called our case the most well-documented pattern of custody corruption he'd seen in years. Some people paid fines, some lost freedoms, some lost the thing people like that fear more than prison: access. Phones stop ringing, back doors don't open, reputations cool from lava to stone. We turned the ballroom into a war room. The Lisa Morrison Foundation opened with $50 million and a mission that made me breathe deeper. Fund lawyers for parents who can't outspend a lie, hire investigators who can smell a bribe in a spreadsheet, protect kids from being treated like trophies. Our first case was a dad in Ohio whose in-laws had a very friendly judge. We filed motions, brought receipts, and carried his kids back through his front door 2 weeks later. Our second was a young widow in Texas who sounded like me on the phone. Breath too quick, hope rationed like medicine, and we got her daughter home before Christmas. Some nights I sit in the kitchen and cry like a cracked hydrant, because that's what relief looks like when you've been underwater too long. People ask about Patricia and Caroline like characters on a show. Did they apologize? Did they mean it? Do I forgive them? Here's the unglamorous truth. There were apologies. There were sentences some of you will call too light. There were consequences that finally seeped past the velvet rope and into rooms that used to belong to them. Forgiveness isn't a scene, it's a practice. Some days I can't find it. Other days I can. Forgiveness doesn't mean giving back keys or letting someone rewrite the past. It means I refuse to let their cruelty set the temperature of my home. It means when Marcus asks, "What was Daddy like?" I talk about the man who read to kids in a navy suit and sang off-key lullabies, and yes, about the chess player who moved money through a maze to protect us, because both are true. Let me ask you something hard. Is it justice if you need money to make the truth loud enough to be heard? Or is it just volume? Should families with power be able to build legal fortresses inside systems meant to protect the powerless? How do we stop experts for hire from turning grief into evidence and love into liability? If you were me, would you have taken the 10 million and disappeared, or the 250 and gone to war? Do you think that's fair? A year after David's death, we visited his grave with daisies the color of sunlight. The twins toddled between the stones and giggled at a butterfly, and I thought, this is the only wealth that ever mattered. Back at the house, the nursery he painted still smells a little like sawdust on hot days, and the foundation's phones won't stop ringing. And I am learning to live in a world where truth doesn't whisper anymore, it speaks. So here's where I need you. If this story hit you in the chest, if it made you angry or hopeful or both, say something. Drop a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me what you would have done at that door when someone said 1 hour. If you've been through something like this, and it's safe to share, tell your story. You have no idea who needs to read it tonight. And if you believe justice shouldn't depend on a last name or a bank account, hit subscribe and stay with me, because the next chapter is already knocking. The secret I kept for one terrible week didn't just change my life. It changed a system that thought it couldn't be changed. Now it's your turn. What does justice look like where you live, and who gets to decide?